Chapter 3. As I was well up in my studies, being a good Latin scholar, and then well versed in the French, though this last was not the regular course, I easily joined the junior class in their last session towards commencement. Jeremiah Day was president and very advanced in life, unprepossessing in features, yet with the impress of a high moral and benign nature. I had gone to Boston in part to determine whether I would enter Harvard or Yale, and decided to go to New Haven on account of its reputed beauty of trees as well as its reputation for thoroughness in education, a prime quality always with me, for when I studied Latin with Joshua Fry, Graves, and Bates, boarding more than a mile from our school, often came to consult the old teacher about the translation of a single word when they differed. This was the way to make great scholars and great men. The vast field of the curriculum attempted in modern times is more destructive to the intellect than no education at all, in the great mass of students. The mind, enfeebled by frequent failures to grasp the subject at issue, becomes often despondent and at last impotent. There were quite a number of Southerners then in Yale, so I soon felt at home, and entered upon my studies with good heart. I joined one of the college societies and took a leading part in the debates, but as I soon entered upon an exciting political career, I do not now remember to which society I did or do now belong. I believe it was the Alpha Beta Phi. President Day was silent, dignified, and amiable. He never said anything, but we all loved him, all the other professors and their admirers and their critics. Benjamin Stillman, the chief figure, was then the height of his eminence as a chemist and inventor and experimenter, and in all the civilized world of large stature and very large brain, and as happy as a big sunflower, full of vanity, but that pleasant sort of which, running over, allows his friends to share the intoxicating fluid. And so he, too, has no enemies. Professor Goodrich was ambitious and great, I suppose in Greek, but as I went through 4 colleges and do not know my Greek letters, hardly pass on. Professor J.L. Kingsley was a man of fine common sense and was highly respected. Professor Olmsted was silent, amiable, and liked by his scholars. The Reverend Leonard Bacon was then the leading preacher in the Independent Presbyterian Church at Yale, a cold, technical, dogmatic Puritan. He was always an uncompromising defender of slavery, bolstering it up when it could only take a stand in the Jewish scriptures after it had been driven for centuries from the hearts of all true Christians. Perhaps he found it in his interest to be on the winning side for the Union when he saw it was inevitable and that slavery and all its defenders would go down. But I pass the learned doctor to consider a character worthy of admiration and gratitude of all mankind. One of the peculiarities of the antebellum times was the isolation of thought between the liberals of the South and the North. Such was the policy of the South. So when I entered Yale, with my soul full of hatred to slavery, I had never known anything of Garrison or his history. Soon after I entered college, before I had noted the situation, it was announced that Garrison was going to speak at the South Church that night, the church, at least, nearest to the south of the city, and I think so called. Who is Garrison? I asked. Why, Garrison is the abolitionist, don't you know? So, as I had never heard of the abolitionist, nor the name hardly, I went to hear Garrison. Every accessible place was crowded, but I pressured on determinedly to be in the front, so far as to see and hear him fully. In plain, logical, and sensuous language, he treated the divine institution so as to burn like a branding iron into the most callous hide of the slaveholder and his defenders. This was a new revelation to me. I felt all the horrors of slavery, but my parents were slaveholders. All my known kindred in Kentucky were slaveholders, and I regarded it as I did other evils of humanity, as the fixed law of nature of God, and submitted as best I might. But Garrison dragged out the monster from all his citadels and left him stabbed to the vitals and dying at the feet of every logical and honest mind. As water to a thirsty wayfarer were to me Garrison's arguments and sentiments. He was often and boisterously hissed, but I stood silent and thoughtful in the depths of my new thoughts. Another meeting of the citizens was called for the night to answer Garrison. I do not now remember who were the orators, but the liberal Dr. Bacon ought to have been, if he was not the man to answer with such broad logic of truth and justice and religion and humanity, for he had the temperament and technical training which best fitted him to make worst appear the better cause. I once more got a good place to hear, and as sophism after sophism and false conclusion from more false assumptions followed in chain-like succession, they were greeted with thundering applause. This aroused me from my apathy. I felt the greatest indignation. I never in all my life was so agitated in public assemblage. I first thought I would interrupt him and deny his assumptions of fact. Then I concluded to answer him in order, and was preparing to do so when another sprang up and gave me time to redirect that I had come to Yale to learn and not to teach. So I returned to my mom as full of tumultuous emotions as the night before. So I returned to my room as tumultuous emotions as the night before. I then resolved, however, that when I had the strength, if ever, I would give slavery a death struggle. I pursued my studies with energy. On the 22nd day of February, 1832, I was chosen to deliver the centennial oration on Washington's birth. This I spoke only on the part of the senior class. There was no other similar oration made in New Haven that day, so I had the whole of the elite, social and literary of the college in New Haven to hear me. And there I made my first anti-slavery speech. See Greenlee's Life and Writings of C.M. Clay, New York, 1858. My mother, my eldest brother Sidney P., a Presbyterian, and all of my family, but Brutus and I, my sisters Eliza, Paulina, and Anne, belonged to some church. The moral sentiments move in concert as the evil passions do. So the good seed which Garrison had watered, and which my own bitter experience had sown, aroused my whole soul. There was a religious revival in our senior year. I too abandoned my old departures from the known paths of the eternal laws, and joined the rivalists, and was baptized by the Baptist minister the Baptist minister in New Haven Sound. My mother was a Calvinist Baptist, and naturally I would fall into her church. But when I remembered the speakers of the Garrison foray, I could never feel brotherhood for such Christians. So I sought a commonplace Baptist preacher and was baptized in the sea and received into his church. I received my religion as a matter of course, just as I did slavery on trust. But when I began to read the scriptures on my return home, like Paley's Evidences of Christianity, they rather upset than confirmed my faith, and I finally wrote to our New Haven minister to strike me from the roll of the church. Then I was reminded of Bacon's Theology and Fruits, which I had seen in the Old South Church, for I was all around me in the whole clergy, with the exception of John G. Fee, now of Berea College, Madison County, Kentucky, standing for slavery as a divine institution. I had no fellowship with men with such creed, and I preferred, if God was on that side, to stand with the devil rather than be silent, at least. So if I had said and wrote hard things against scriptures, and especially the preachers, it was because they were false prophets, which was necessary to destroy with slavery.